Hello, it's Fleur here from Little Desert Quilts. Welcome to my Geeks live class. I want to talk to you about my Kaniva Block template set. So this is the Kaniva Block template set. It comes in a little bag with the template pieces and the instructions, and I'm going to tell you all about it. So the template set I designed as a scrap buster. So you may have baskets and baskets full of scraps and you're not sure what to do with them. Well, this Kaniva Block template set scrap buster system will help you out. You can see some examples behind me of quilts that have been made with the Kaniva Block scrap buster system. I also have a bag here to show you that has also been made with the Kaniva Block scrap buster system. So the blocks have been turned into a little bag. So there's lots of things you can do with your scraps once you start sorting them and using them with the scrap buster system. So there are three template pieces. I'm going to move the camera down onto the table so you can see what's going on. Okay, you might just add a little bit of light to that. And so here we have three template pieces. The A piece is this red one here. The B piece is upside down. Oops. There's the B piece and the C piece. So there are three simple template pieces. I like to put masking tape on the back of my templates. I just create a little loop and stick them on the back of the template. So you can see them. I've got some here that have already got them on. So I simply put that on the back, and that holds the template in place when I'm cutting and saves it from moving around. So just with a little loop of masking tape, oops, those two have stuck together, I can then cut my scraps. The other thing I like to do with my scraps, I usually press them first, but just because I want to demonstrate for you, I'm just going to lay the scrap down here, and this A piece is going to fit on there now. You may have noticed that my template pieces have grain lines marked on them, and that is to help you with lining up the grain of the fabric so that when you do make the block, the straight of grain is on the outside edge. So I'm just going to place the A piece on top of here, and I like to cut with a smaller rotary cutter. So in my cutter case here, I've got two. I have the Alpha brand, and I also have, this is Clover, this is Alpha. So I have the two different brands. Both of them work equally well. So just holding my template piece down, and because I've got the masking tape on the back, it makes it a whole lot easier to keep it in place. Now you can also do this on a rotating cutting mat, which will make it very, very simple to cut around your scrap pieces. Now you notice because I've got that masking tape on there, it doesn't matter if I take my hand off the template, I know that it is holding the fabric in place. Once I've done my cutting, I can then check to see that I have cut accurately. You may find that sometimes the template moves a fraction, and you may just want to give that a nice little trim up. Remove the fabric from the template, and then this is where this red template piece is something special. On the back of the instruction sheet is this little key. It's a shaded box here. Not sure whether you can see that or whether we're getting glare on there. Shaded box, and you put your fabric next to that, and the instructions say to hold the red piece up to your eyes. So if I just put this up to the camera, hold it up to your eyes and look through that at your fabric and the key. And the question says, is your fabric lighter than the key? If the answer is yes, you put it into the light box. If the answer is no, put it into the dark box. And then it says, if you're not sure, don't use it. Because if you're not sure whether it's light or dark, it is probably so close to being the same as that shaded key that it can be confusing and distort your lights and darks selection. So I've decided that this is definitely lighter than my key, so therefore it would go in my, darker than my key, so it would go in my darks box. So there's my darks and there's my lights. I have them in ice cream containers, and by choosing two different brands of ice cream container, I can actually sit one inside the other, and that's pack up. So I use these as leaders and enders when I am sewing, doing other things. So what are leaders and enders? It simply means that instead of using a scrap piece of fabric to start your sewing line, you use one of these. So it is in the instructions here on how to put these together. There's instructions on cutting from scraps. There's instructions on how to cut strips and then cut your pieces if you want to do a quick cutting. So basically you would grab one from the dark box, one from the light box, the A pieces. Now that one is a little bit in need of a press. So you join these two together along this long seam. So I simply sit those right sides together and pin them. And I'm going to use these large pins so that you can see. And I like to put my pins in at an angle, approximately 45 degrees to the edge. I always use 2 pins because if I just use 1 pin, then it can become a pivot point and things can move. So I would then take this to the machine and stitch along this side. Now after I've stitched that seam, I then press that. I can use my iron to press it or I can use my finger presser. And I press the seam towards the dark side. And then my next step is to add on the large triangle. So I've got a couple here. So both of these have a dark and a light side. Now on one of them, I'm just going to turn one around. On one of them I'm going to add a light triangle. And on the other one, I'm going to add a dark triangle. So the whole way this scrap buster system works is by always going light, dark, or dark, light, dark, etc. So I would then turn this over and pin it on. Now you may notice that my triangles are nubbed, which means the corners are cut off. So this lines up perfectly. Again, I would put 2 pins in so that I don't get a pivot point. And then I would stitch that seam, and I would do the same with the dark block. This is what I call the dark block. Pin that on and stitch that seam, and then I would press them again so they are ready to be stitched. And when it comes back, it's going to have the light triangle, the dark rectangle, and the light rectangle. And then just let me grab one with the dark triangle. So this one has a dark triangle, a light rectangle, and a dark rectangle here, or the A piece. So then we're going to add the small triangle. So this one, because it goes light, dark, light, the triangle that goes on here needs to be dark. So I'm just going to select one from my dark box. And on this one, it goes dark, light, dark. So then I need to select a light triangle. Now, all these instructions are in the instruction sheet. It tells you what to add that you need. So you're making what I call a light half of the block and a dark half of the block. So these would be pinned on, and again these triangles are nubbed as well, which means that the corners are cut off the triangle and they line up perfectly with the rectangle. So we stitch those seams, and then when it comes back the next time, it will look like, just let me grab one of each, a light one and a dark one, so that one needs to be pressed. My instructions will also tell you which way to press the seams. Most of the time it's pressing to the dark, except for that large triangle, and we always press towards that large triangle, simply because then when we join the blocks together, the 2 halves, they're going to butt together nicely. So now we have a dark triangle, a light rectangle, a dark rectangle, and a light triangle, and the opposite one has light, dark, light, dark. So if the piece has a dark, large triangle like this one does, then I am going to add a dark, small triangle, and I'll just randomly grab a dark piece. My little rule is I never use the same fabric in the same block, so I wouldn't be putting, if there was a triangle piece, there's one here. If I happen to pull out this triangle piece, because it is the same as this fabric here, I wouldn't use that piece. This is how I keep it scrappy. So I put this on here. Now the centre of this triangle should line up with this centre seam. I flip it over and I pin from the other side. And the reason that I pin from the other side is then I can control those seams. Now I'm going to put in 3 pins, one at each end and also one in the centre where that seam is, where that center seam is, and I pin that down so that when I stitch that, and I stitch from this side so I can see those seams. Now on this one, because this has a large light triangle, I need to add a small light triangle here. Again, I'm going to put that on. I check that the triangle, the peak of the triangle is sitting in the middle of that seam, so I know it's lined up correctly. The nubbing also should line up, and then I'm going to just need to grab some more pins here. I'm going to line these up. Line these up and pin them. So a pin each end, holding that seam down. So I find that by pinning at an angle like this, I can get my needle, when I'm sewing, I can get my needle into that seam here before I need to remove the pin. So it helps to hold everything in place. So that's what we do next. We pin and sew that. And when it comes back, it looks like this. Here's an example of dark, light, and then a dark triangle there. And then this one has light, dark, and a light triangle there. Now I store them at this stage in meat trays like this. So this one has all my dark ones. When I say dark, I mean the large triangle is dark, and this other tray has all my light ones. So the large triangle is light. So when I've got quite a few made, then I can start joining them together. And again, I look at them and make sure that I don't have any fabrics the same, because this is how I keep it scrappy. So I look at each fabric and make sure that nothing is the same. So I'd be happy with joining that one together. Now this diagonal is the seam that we're going to join. So the two triangles, the two large triangles here meet in the center, and then we should have pressed the seams towards the large triangle on both sides, which means when we flip that over, we have seams going in the opposite direction there in the center. And I use my finger and thumb to make sure that that lines up nicely together. I pin through that seam and out through the other seam in the bottom side, and that holds everything in place. I put a pin in every time there is a seam. So the center there, the nubbing should line up for you. And I know there is a seam under there, can't see it from the top, but I'm going to pin it anyway, and that will make sure that that seam stays flat. And then I'm going to pin here. So I now have 5 pins in my piece because I pin at every seam, including the one underneath that I can't see. So when I stitch that and then press, it's going to look something like this. So this is a final block. So we have all the light. On this side is the light triangles, this side is the dark triangles, and then we have a light and a dark in the center. So that is the Kaniva block. And if you join 2 of those together, then you will get a square block. But you could also join them end to end and create a border with it. And as I showed you earlier, I have made a bag out of it. Now I've got to show you something else. I've got something else that I want to show you about the Kaniva block. Perhaps you don't like cutting with a rotary cutter, and maybe you have a cutter like this, a Go cutter, or a Sizzix, or something, a machine that will take a cutting die. So I have created a cutting die with the Kaniva block template pieces on them. There is 1 A piece, 2 B pieces, and 1 C piece, and the grain lines are still in the same orientation as the original template pieces. So this is still going to give you shapes that have the straight of grain on the outside edge of the block. Now you may also notice that my template, whoops, I'll turn that off, has a line on the bottom of it there. I don't know whether you can see that. There's a line across the bottom. That line is for you to line up a layer cake square. So a layer cake is a 10-inch square. You simply fold that square in half and place the cut edge on that line. Make sure that both ends of your piece of fabric are covering the cutting blade, so the lines on this where the cutting blades are, and by putting your layer cake square, yes, it does hang over the end here. That's okay because it's important that it lines up here, and I'm going to show you why. I've got one loaded ready to go through the machine, so I'm just going to wind this through that way. So it has a mat over the top, and my cutting die will cut those shapes for me. Whoops, very quickly. So because I folded it in half, I've got 2 A pieces, and I have got 2 C pieces because it's folded, and sometimes there is just one little spot that doesn't always go through the cutter. So there's your 2 C pieces, and you actually get 4 of the B pieces. And what's left of your little 10-inch square, so we've got, so let me show them to you. 1, no, that's not going to sit there. 1, 2, 3, 4 of the B pieces, 2 of the A pieces, which are the larger triangles, and they're the C pieces. 2 of the C pieces and 2 of the A pieces, which are the rectangle. Now, all of these are lights because I've already checked them with my key. So I'm going to pop all of those into my lights box. I'm going to put my B pieces on the small triangle, my A pieces over there on the rectangle, and the large C pieces into my lights box, ready for using next time. Now, I want to show you the leftover bits. So from a layer cake, this is all that's left over, that tiny little bit. Let me hold it around that way so you can see it better. And this larger piece, if I snip that off here, and I snip them off at this end, this larger piece is about 2 1/4 inches wide. Now, I like to do my binding at 2 1/2, but I can manage to do binding with 2 1/4. And if I just snip those little corners off as well, then I have got a piece here that is wide enough just to make binding from. Now, it's only a short piece, but if I join all these together, then I can have scrappy binding. I can have scrappy binding to go on my scrappy quilt, which means the waste from using a layer cake is those tiny little bits on my cutting die. So I have the cutting die available. The cutting die comes with, you get the cutting die, you get the mat, and you also get, what did I do with them? A lid. Here they are. You also get a lid to protect the die. So I always pack them up with the cutting mat in there, put the lid on top, and you get all of that, the cutting die. So that makes cutting a lot quicker. You can use the 10-inch layer cake square. You can cut your own layer cake square, 10-inch, or you can leave it as a 10-inch strip and just fold it in half and make sure you line it up the correct way with the cut edge against the line on the cutting die. And then you can cut multiple times. It will cut 6 layers of fabric, so you can actually put 3 on. And I recommend, if you're going to do the 6 layers, that you put all lights on. So then when you use light fabric, do 6 layers of light fabric, and then you can just pick up those shapes and put them straight into your lights box. And then when you do dark fabric, do 6 layers of dark fabric, and then they go straight into the dark box. And you don't have to sort them after you've cut them. You sort them, you decide what colour they are. So check your colour, check for your colour, your shade against the key on the back of the instruction sheet before you put it through the cutting die. So that's just a quicker way to cut your scraps. However, you can always use your trusty rotary cutter, and I do recommend the 28mm size because it's smaller and easier to use around a template. And a rotating cutting mat is a great idea if you're using the cutting die. Back to this little scrappy bit. Join all these together and you've got scrappy binding to go around your scrappy quilt. Now, I also want to show you another thing that you can do. So I'm just going to pack that up and pop it down out of the way. So I've shown you how I do it with scraps, but what if you wanted to control your palette a little bit more? So I've actually got one on the go here that's using all black and whites. Still have the same shapes, the A rectangle piece, the B small triangle, and where are they? The C large triangle are in another box. So basically anything that's black or anything that's white is what I'm using for this particular quilt. And I'm going to show you some of, so they're all my shapes, and they're just in little plastic trays, recycling. And hang on a minute, let me get some blocks out of here. So these are some half blocks. So there's a half block. And then I also make them in the light way as well. Now in the bottom of here there should be some blocks that have been put together. So here we go. Now this one is actually a little bit different because with this one I've used the darks in the rectangles and I've used lights all the way around instead of doing the way I showed you with the scraps. However, this one, if I join this one together, I would have the traditional light dark thing happening. So there are other ways that you can join your pieces together. And I'm going to show you some more. Yes, there is more. Right, so that's the black and white controlled palette happening. Just going to pop all those bits back in there. And some of the other things that you can do, now these blocks I'm going to show you here have all been made with the Kaniva Block template set. So just those three shapes. Where are they? Rectangle. This is 2.5 inches wide, so you can use your leftover jelly rolls to cut that. And then the B and the C triangle. So just those three shapes and some other things that you can make. So these blocks I'm going to show you have all been made, would you believe, with at least one of those template pieces. So these were a different technique where I joined strips together first and then use one of the template pieces to cut it. So a quick, easy way to use up some leftover jelly roll strips, because all of these started with 2.5 inch strips. Then this one here is making a checkerboard, so I used the A piece to make that checkerboard. I did not cut little squares. I cut rectangles and then joined them together, or I cut strips and joined them together. And then this is another one as well. This is actually the leftovers from making this block. And then another way I can use it, yet another way. So this one here was, I have made quite a few blocks here and they will all get joined together. So strips, join my strips together and then use the triangle, one of the triangles, the big one I think it was, with this to cut pieces. So I have a Facebook group called Kaniva Block Users. It is a private group, and to get into that group you need to purchase the Kaniva Block set. So when you purchase the Kaniva Block set, I can add you to the Kaniva Block Users group, and that's where you can find all these extra things and extra ways to use the Kaniva Block template set. So you can only buy this from Little Desert Quilts. It is designed by me and made exclusively for Little Desert Quilts. So you can't buy this anywhere else. And same with the cutting die. Those cutting dies are made for me. It says Kaniva Block on the side there. And they are made exclusively, you see it on there, Kaniva Block. They are made exclusively for Little Desert Quilts. So if you're interested in a Kaniva Block template set or a Kaniva Block cutting die, then go to the Little Desert Quilts Facebook page and contact me through there. So thank you for joining me and enjoy the rest of your geeks. And I'm doing another class, got a couple of classes happening in this gig, so I hope to see you then. Bye.